Yay. Well, thank you, Risha, for having me. Thank you to the whole department for having me. I'm glad to be here. It's a little gloomy, but we'll dive in. So that's exciting. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if anyone is having trouble, raise your hand, etc. And someone can troubleshoot it. It might not be me, but someone. And of course, I think that they've both, everyone has mentioned, but if you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm here to answer them, and we'll dive in. So today we're, of course, as Risha mentioned, we are talking about how do you get customers and how do you keep them. So before, we dive in, I figured I'd do a little level setting. What are we talking about today, right? I'll do an intro, kind of talk through, do a little bit more bio about me. Risha obviously spoke wonderfully about me, so I'm so thankful. But then we're going to talk a little bit about the mom test, because I want to level set for what we're talking about. To assume, I'm going to assume we have a baseline. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk a little bit about marketing strategy. And then we'll dive into 10 strategies on how to get customers, and then 10 strategies on how to keep customers. And of course, there's tons of questions at the end. I'll take them all. And of course, if you have them, put them in the chat and we'll go from there. So first things first, as Risha said, I'm Jacey Cadet. I am the VP of Marketing and Community at Atlanta Ventures. And we office out of the Atlanta Tech Village. If anyone ever wants to come up here, let me know. I'll give you a tour. We can do a school tour. If you haven't been, it's amazing. If you have been, it's amazing. So come on up. As she said, I run pitch practice. It's been happening for 10 years. I've been doing it for the past 3. And I will tell you, you could come 10 times and pitch 10 different pitches and it never gets old. So you can always practice your pitch. Come on up if you want. And of course, I thought I'd mention, I've been a part of launching or launching 19 companies or marketing initiatives. So hopefully that gives me a little bit of authority on this topic. And that topic is, of course, we're talking about customers, but before we dive to customers, really, if you came to the last class or if you didn't, that's why I was like, let me mention it again. The Mom Test is one of the best books that you could, I think, read if you are an entrepreneur or if you're just trying to build a product, because what this book does is easy. It's 70 pages. You can get it online. You can get it on Audible, but it helps you to figure out how to talk to customers and learn if your business is a good idea or if anyone's lying to you, right? Because what happens is we're like, oh, mom, don't you love this idea? Well, your mom's probably lying to you, okay? Because she loves you and not the idea, but it helps walk you through like what's some example emails to reach out to customers, what's ways to avoid bias pitches. And why I bring this up is because we're going to dive into marketing, but if you do not know who your customer is and you don't know who you're talking to, which we'll talk a little bit about that, then and haven't proven that your idea is actually something that people want to buy and pay for, that's again something that AT talked about last time. This all might be a waste, right? So I say it here because hopefully you've talked to customers and hopefully you've built a product that people want. So now that we've decided that's a level setting, we know that you have customers or you know who your customers are. We know you have a product that could be really great. Let's talk a little bit about strategy, right? So the vision is just to not throw things to the wind, right? You want to have a little bit of thought behind that, right? So of course, a strategy is it lays out the steps of action that you're going to take to help persuade people to buy whatever you have, aka what is your value prop. Okay. So I like to think about this it's called the AIDAR or ADAR model, or ADAR. So hopefully you're building a strategy, right? That has this in mind, right? So you want to create attention for your brand, right? You want to generate some interest, right? You want to create desire. You want to have like an emotional connection to that buyer so that that's something that they want to actually like or buy. It also should empower them to take action, and then of course, retention, which we'll talk about when we're talking about how to retain customers. But once they have it, how do you keep it, right? How do you keep that customer or have them keep being a repeat buyer. So hopefully you're creating a strategy with this framework in mind. And when you create this strategy, you want to be setting SMART goals. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times before, but if you're not creating some of the goals around, like when I talk about how to get a customer, if you're not setting actual SMART goals around it, then it's not trackable. You can't measure it. You can't figure out how it performs if you didn't start that from the beginning. So an example of course, a SMART marketing goal was maybe a coffee company is wanting to launch a new flavor over the holidays. Okay. So how they've set it up is from a specific SMART, they want to gain 1,000 new customers. Okay. From a measurable perspective, they want to try and get this done by the end of the year, right? So they're going to launch it in the holidays, but they want to get 1,000 by the end of the year. That's that's a metric that they can track. Is it actionable, right? Can they do it in an effective way, right? That when you talk about this, it's determined if the advertising will be effective. They knew where their customers are, and they would launch on a certain ad platform. Of course, is it relevant? I mentioned that they want to launch on the holiday. And so they schedule it for November, because if you're going to get ahead of the holidays, you need to have that. And of course, is it time bound, right? Yes, they did. They're aiming to get this by the end of the year. They launch in November, etc. So specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, time bound. I'm sure this is nothing new for you all, but I set this strategy up ahead of time so that whenever we talk about anything that you're doing from the marketing, gaining and retaining customers, you can have this in mind. All right, so let's dive in. First things first, how do you gain customers? So there's 1,000 things you can do. Truly, I didn't create any of these things. They have been out there. They're tried and tested. So I'm going to give you 10. Okay. And I'll try and give some specific examples. And my hope in giving those examples is that if you're building a product, or you're, kind of thinking about launching a company in that way, you can take that and apply it to your product, your service, etc. So first things first, you need to define a persona, right? A persona is going to help you gain customers, because you're going to know, what do they like? What is their habits and their buying patterns? What's going to serve them better, right? So companies that sell a service or a product, they ultimately know, like, how do they reach their ideal customer? How do they talk to them? Where do they live? Where do they spend time, right? So an example of this, there's a surfboard company, let's say, and they have decided that they're going to make longer boards than the average board. Okay. So what they did was they defined that their ideal customer was over 6 feet tall, 18 to 25 years old, and they're usually college or recent graduate and love the beach. Right. So that's an example of what does that persona, what do? They love the beach, etc. So first thing first, define a persona. Next, have a consistent brand or website. So this can go a long way, right? So if you have a logo, if you've crafted your brand story, hopefully in all of your customer discovery and product, you've had these things. Hopefully you have somewhere to send them, right? Even if it's just a landing page, but of course a website can be a five page site. So that is helpful. But I always say, have something that you can send them, right? How are they going to sign up? How are they going to buy your project? How are they buy your product? How are they going to do anything? A website's a good landing spot. And with this, I always say, have a call to action. Ask them something, right? Prompt them, ask them a question, learn more, draw them in, have them submit to a form, right? This is, again, if you want to get customers and you have nowhere to capture their data, how are you going to get them? So make sure you have that call to action that invites them to learn more. So an example would be, you can run promos, or you could just say, we're doing this, a sale for a new launch in a brand. You can get free access until Tuesday, right? So submit here to do it. Or sometimes people will do like a free report. Let's say you did a study and you want to share it. They can put their email to get that, right? But either way, if you don't have a brand and you don't have a logo, then it's know where to land. And I will say, if you do have a logo already and you do have a website, make sure that it looks fresh. Make sure that you're continuing to update with the messaging as you continue to iterate with your customers. Next, SEO. SEO can be this very kind of broad pie in the sky thing, but ultimately it can also be an effective way to get your company to the top, right? Especially if you're a startup or especially if you're brand new, it's a powerful way also to figure out what customers are landing where, and you can target them with SEO. So search engine optimization is what SEO is. So what that means is you have keywords and phrases that are located in the back end of your site. So you input that data and it's probably through your website platform. And that increases your searchability, right? So searchability, when they go to try and find you online or on the internet, wherever, it's really helpful when you put those keywords on the back end to help you be more searchable, right? So an example. So let's say you have a sporting good company, okay? They're having a big sale on bikes, or you're trying to get rid of out of date stock. And so there's a lot of bikes out there that you're trying to get rid of. And you're a local shop that, and it's a lot of cycling gear as well. So some examples that you would want to put throughout your content, whether it be blogs or your backend web platform, would be bike, cycle, bike shop, bike sale, bike discount, cycle gear, etc. Right? So having those things on your website, on the landing page, in your ads, etc., is going to help drive traffic and increase your search engine optimization. And that ultimately will help you get more customers. Next, start a blog. If you don't have a blog, start a blog. I'm not saying everyone has to have a blog, but this is one way. And really what this is it provides a little bit more context to support your product or help them learn more about your company and about what they want to be doing, right? So one thing that we talk about is customer journeys a lot, right? Like, where is a future customer in their buying journey? And blogs can be a really supportive tool to help them kind of in that decision-making process, get them over the hump, right? They can read something that's helpful or that's informative about your product, and that might trigger them to then buy. So an example might be, so let's say you've got a counselor, right? Who's they're looking to take on new, like they're offering a new service, a new therapy service, right? And they want to get clients in the door who understand that. They might go ahead and start publishing a weekly blog that kind of educates and trains that potential customer so they can warm them up, right? It can get them used to this new technique and then ultimately in the door to start that session. And, you could apply that to any services business out there that you're working on. Next, social media. Hopefully everyone here knows about social media. All right. There's lots of new platforms out there. There's also old platforms out there that your customers might still be using. So the ultimate goal is you want to leverage that and be where your customer is. Okay. Because this is more of like a brand loyalty play when you're trying to either support them, you can do this to retain customers, but reaching them where they are is such a helpful way. And if they're on TikTok or they're on a Facebook parent group trying to talk about all these things, be there, right? Connect with them. You can also make offers to them that they maybe only get on social, or you can DM. It's a lot more if you're able to be more personable on there. And of course, when let's say you've got your blog, you've been creating this content, you've now got your social media accounts and you're posting regularly. An example of how to utilize social media for, let's talk about the coffee company I mentioned, right? Let's say they post a company video on Monday. They post a new flavor on Tuesday. They do a promo on Thursday. And then on Friday, they kind of go live and interact with customers and encourage them to test new products, right? So that's a way every day they're engaging and helping to build brand awareness and ultimately bring those folks in. And I say these things, right? Especially blogs and social. And I'll put this stat here because ultimately your marketing strategy is 20% content creation and 80% distribution, right? That's something to remember. Ultimately, you can create a blog, you can create a post, but if you're not putting it out in the world and getting in front of customers, then they're not seeing it, right? So you really want to spend a lot of time. You can write a blog, but then you got to think, where am I going to put it? An email, a social, etc. So just that's something to kind of keep in mind when you're trying to produce and also strategize. Okay. So another great way to get customers is partner with influencers, with a business who's maybe similar, or you can build a network from that and reward those affiliates, right? Why reinvent the wheel? That's what I say. If you've got folks that you can strategize with and be on that journey and co-sell or co-promote, do it. It's a great way to co-brand things. And you'll see this oftentimes with a brand that pairs up and sells, so like Apple will sell a certain product with a college, except, so they'll be like, oh, once you register for classes, you might get this, etc. Another 7th tip is offer discounts. Now I mentioned this that you could put a discount on social or put something in your blog, but that does get customers in. And a good way to do it is offer it to first-time customers. Now, obviously when you retain, you can offer those things, but introductory offers can bring someone in and then it's low risk, right? Let's say a karate studio is saying, hey, we've got introductory courses for $100. Normally they're $400 a month, but it gets them in the door. They love your product because you're talking to the right person. And then you can kind of track that, who's redeeming those offers and target them later and keep them, AKA retain them. But if you get them in the door, that's a great way to do it. Okay. Another thing is like bring a friend, buy one, get one free, etc. You've heard of those things before. An 8th one is build an email list or a mailing list. And I've mentioned emails a couple times, right? When you think about distribution and getting in front of your customers, once you've built those personas and once you know who you're talking to, email marketing can keep you kind of at the front of their mind, right? So you can send those blogs that you've written, you can send those discounts out, you can keep in front of them, say monthly, maybe bi-weekly, because everyone is bombarded all the time. But if you can get in their inbox and they're just scrolling their emails or something, this is a way to, oh yeah, I do know I need to go buy my new skis or something like that. Okay, let's see here. Oh, keep in mind, you can also automate these. There's tools and there's free tools out there. There's a lot. MailChimp, of course, is one of the local ones, local unicorn, shall we say, which has done pretty well. But you can set these up and it can auto schedule for you. That's the other thing, so that you want to be efficient when you're reaching out. If you're posting on social, you're creating blogs, you're building a mailing list, you also can set some of that up on auto, and there's tools for that. Another one is network. Right? Like if you're new and trying to get the word out, networking is free. Okay. If we're out here trying to hustle when you're starting up and you don't have a big ad budget, good old fashioned word of mouth, go to every event you can. I'm sure that the Entrepreneurship Center has a full list of things to do. The Atlanta Tech Village, the ATDC Center in Midtown, Alpharetta, wherever you are, there is industry events, and just go. That's where your customers are. So go talk with them, be authentic, learn from them, be helpful, and just show up. And that is hopefully a way to, bring in the customers. When you're there and active participant, you can make those connections and close the deals later because you've built a good rapport. And then, of course, last but not least, ask for referrals. Because if you've got, say, 2 thriving customers, they're amazing, they love you, right? They're probably not just going to actively say, oh, let me tell Bob, my coworker, right? But if you ask actively, And they love your product. If you've been going through, we'll talk about how to keep them. If you've done great customer retention, then why wouldn't they give you a referral? You can always build a referral program, which, they get $100 here and there, they get kickbacks, but ultimately a lot of times if people love your product, they will sell on your behalf. So ask. That's the best thing you can do. And I'll pause there because soon we'll dive into the, how to keep them. But Risha, I don't know. I haven't been looking even at the chats. I have no idea if we could pause here for a few questions.
Perfect. And so we did have one question, and that was, can you speak a little bit more about the difference between, say, a blog and social media, and how can you potentially, this is not part of the question, but how can you combine them effectively? I know you talked through that a little bit before.
Sure. Yeah. So when you think about a blog, usually that is created and it's it's a little more long form than social is typically allowed for. Now, I'll give a caveat because you can also write a blog on LinkedIn natively, because that is something that social media has now implemented into their strategies and into the way that you can post. But a blog ultimately is a long form way for you to talk about, well, you said an initiative, right? But usually it's about your product or something that can be helpful, right? So for me, when I'm thinking through our blog, we write on 5 different topics, right? So we talk about startups in general, we talk about fundraising, we talk about marketing, we talk about pitching, and we talk about investing and fundraising, what that looks like. There's a lot of other subtopics under that, but usually what we do is we figure out what are our big buckets, and then we write content that would be helpful on that. Then what you turn around is you have to put that somewhere, right? So you write it, you draft it up and say a Google Doc, and then you put it on your website platform. So we use Webflow is our website. There's Wix, there's Webflow, there's Squarespace. Anything that is called a CMS, a content management system, will be able to facilitate a blog publish, right? So you publish it in the world, it's on your website. But if you don't have customers, no customers are coming to your website. So how do you get the word out, right? AKA, remember I said 20% content creation, now 80% distribution. So you want to put that one place, could be social media. So social media, gosh, there's so many platforms. You've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you got TikTok, you have Google, you have, LinkedIn, there's so many platforms. So when I talk about what we do, we actually, for different channels, we use different things, right? So an example is I run a podcast. The podcast is called The Atlanta Story. We tell stories of amazing people doing great work in the city. And what I do is I have a long form video on YouTube, and I put the description there. I do short snippets, and I put those on TikTok. I put them on YouTube Shorts, and I put them on Instagram Reels. And then I have quotes and highlights that I put on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google and Instagram Grid. Right. So I've got one podcast, and then I have 30 things that I can put on social media. I'll pause there if that answered, or if there's another follow-up question, if I answered what you said, Risha.
Oh, that's fantastic. I haven't heard back whether or not, I think that kind of gives such a fantastic insight into how you can utilize and bring those 2 programs together. So no, thank you so much.
Sure.
But I did want to ask you this question on behalf of everyone who's listening, just in case. So you mentioned the email list and getting that distribution together, but how can you then, fantastic in terms of how you can turn that into pushing that out to social media. Would you utilize that blog? I think you mentioned that Touch will be sending email content to these users. And how often should you do that? Should you do this weekly, monthly, yearly?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so 2 questions, right? So how you can absolutely include content from your social and from your blog in your email, right? And and then, so two things, you need to make sure, who are you sending your email to, right? And then how frequently. That's all going to be determined by you and your SMART goals that you set up earlier. So an example for us, we have a newsletter for Atlanta Ventures. We have 5,000 people on the listserv, and how we grow that listserv is we promote the newsletter on social. We have a sign up on our website. And then if anyone ever attends an event with us, I will add them to that newsletter. Or if we speak with anyone, like an entrepreneur, any of the partners, any of my team members, and they think it'd be relevant, we encourage them to sign up, or we say we can add them, right? So we know who it is that we're targeting. And the goal of our newsletter is to share about what we have done and highlight the people that we have interacted with. So we have a section at the top that is based on our events that we host. We then have a section that highlights all of our blogs, because usually our blogs, we write about entrepreneurs ask us questions, and then we write the answers in blogs, because if they're asking, others are probably asking too. So we just disseminate that to our listserv in case they didn't see it on social or on our website. We also put that content in our blog, and then we highlight our portfolio companies, because they're all doing amazing work as well. And as an investment company, we want to highlight our customers, aka our, people, our content provider, or our entrepreneurs and our company founders.
Lights producer Janine.
Yes, I think that answers the question. So we do it monthly, because we have monthly events, and that's a good cadence for us. But some people email weekly. Sometimes they decide to do bi-weekly. So again, it's whatever your SMART goal is for that strategy, all the way back in the AIDAR strategy. I'll pause there. Any other questions before we dive in?
Fantastic. And we got a thank you from the person who posed a question before. So I think you tackled that very well. So yes, I think we're going to ask those questions to keep them coming, but you can continue if you wish.
Great. Okay, so we've talked about these are, again, 10 strategies. There's thousands out there, but those are some of the ones that are easy lifts in the beginning, especially if you're a startup or you're trying to be out here and you're not raising funds, etc. So let's say you've got some customers. This is wonderful. So how do you keep them? Ultimately, customer retention is a metric that a lot of founders and startup leaders will use to measure like your loyalty. There's others as well, but this is something that you can measure over time, and how successful is your business or your product, especially if you're keeping them and they keep coming back. So one great way to keep your customers is to offer a product or service. Or remember that it just has to solve one problem. It doesn't have to solve every problem, because you can build up to that, right? We say land and expand, or niches make riches, right? So you start maybe just with one problem and then expand, right? So I say this, as crazy as it sounds, right? You don't have to offer everything. Just offer something that you do really well. Okay. So an example of this is actually Canva. So Canva started out, they were just access to pro tools, right? So their biggest competitor would have probably been Adobe. And they've been around for a while now and have grown into like a thriving tool. They're solving a lot of problems now, but ultimately they started out just having access to pro design tools for non-designers, right? So just start, you can always grow, but just start with something that keeps them there. Okay. Another thing to think about is subscriptions. Okay. So if you are, customers will be more inclined to continue to buy from you if they maybe get special treatment over time, right? Over the one time. So an example of this might be Amazon Prime. Okay. So now Amazon Prime seems pretty universal, right? A lot of people are like, oh yeah, Amazon Prime. But it started out as kind of like this exclusive thing where people would pay yearly, they would subscribe, and additionally to get faster shipping, right? That was their access. That was what brought them in. Now everyone, I feel like Prime is normal, but that was something that bolstered it. It kind of like got that one time, oh yeah, I'm getting a deal here, but you're paying a little bit more recurring. So you commit to that subscription, but it bolsters the experience. Okay. Next, make sure that you have a strong onboarding experience. Now, I say this mostly with the software in mind, right? So if you've got a coffee shop, it's obviously has to be a good experience, but that's a recurring and that's every day. But from in the therapy example, you want to make sure that they feel cared for, right? It needs to be, people need to know how to use your product, right? So if you have a software, how do they log in? How do they pay their bills? How do the things work? And if you're not teaching or training them, they're out, right? Like if it's too hard to use your product, they're going to return it. They're going to spit it out. They're going to like stop paying, right? So make sure that you get them to a place where there's no friction and you can onboard them in a succinct way. Third or fourth, again, to stay a part of it, to keep your customers, if you become a part of their lifestyle and that they want to associate with your brand, that's not a bad thing, right? So really, if you are kind of ingrained in what they do and what inspires them, it makes it harder to leave. It makes it harder for them to leave you. So an example of this would be Cash App, right? So Cash App, they did not reinvent the wheel, sending money back and forth, like giving money, paying money, right? Obviously it was a digital form, but what they did is they really wanted to, you could comment, you could you could kind of see it was like a social network. So it was like so not only were you paying someone back, but you're like, oh, but I could be a part of this, their lifestyle, their journey, right? And made it easy. Also, they made it seamless and easy instead of having cash, but ultimately kind of like ingrained in their lifestyle so that people often don't carry cash as much anymore because you can Cash App, and there's obviously others out there as well, Venmo, etc. But they made it easy and seamless and part of people's lifestyles, so they're going to come back. Oh, next, build a trust with your customers and also apologize when you make a mistake, right? Like people want to trust you. They want to feel like you've got their back, right? So when you're proving that you're solving their problem, you're working with them. If you're talking to them on the phone, we'll talk about that one later, but they want to show that they're valued, right? So that could be in conversations, that could be in the form of the actual product, building what they need. They trust that they're going to, that your product will solve their needs because you've actually spent time on the product and you know that, right? It's helpful to have that rapport with a customer. So build that. There's a lot of ways you can do that, but ultimately I encourage that for customers or for founders building a customer rapport is to build it on trust. And then of course, here's the thing, people make mistakes. That's a reality. We all do. Just own it, figure out what you're going to do, be very transparent and move on. Because ultimately what I've seen, there's been a lot of different examples out there, but let's say you lose a breach of data or something happens where it goes wrong. If you address it, move on, they'll usually stay with you as opposed to being sketch and not having that trustworthy rapport. They're going to leave you. Number 6, engage with customers, right? I said, we'll get to talk to them. Just talk to your customers, speak with them, chat with them, include a chat bot on, say, your website, call them weekly, call them monthly, call them yearly. If you're not talking with them, you're not learning firsthand, you're not maybe gaining insight on how to make your product better or how to sell it better. But ultimately it's just speaking with them helps you. It helps you build trust. It helps you learn, etc. Just talk to them. You can say this in any way, pick up the call and call them early on. One of our founders, from Greensy, he would literally call his customers every week and give them a report firsthand, recap the report, recap the week and talk to them. And now he doesn't get to do it as much, but he still physically called and texted them. Just get on the phone. Another really helpful way to keep customers is to implement a feedback loop. You don't know how your business is performing unless they're telling you sometimes. I mean, obviously, if they're leaving, that's an indication, but this is a way to keep them before they leave, right? So It could be from surveys, it could be from calls, and then just taking quantitative or qualitative data from those calls, but ultimately having that feedback loop and then regurgitating back and then sharing kind of what you're doing to improve your product. And, with like the survey, gives them trust that you're working for them. One good way to do this is with an NPS, a net promoter score. So oftentimes people might send out a feedback survey. They give you a 5 and share why they gave you a 5. So then you can actively say, hey, our NPS is a 50, which is a little tough. But as you improve, you send it out again and like, oh, they really did this. I'm going to give them an 8. You can share our nets, and our NPS score is now an 80, which is always helpful. But as long as you're doing that feedback loop, they're more willing to stay. Of course, so this is when we talk about like convenience, make it easy to get your product, right? So if you have something that you sell and it's hard to go, it's hard this, like part of that onboarding. If it's hard to get, they're not going to stay, right? Make it as accessible as possible and they will come back, right? Especially if you have the tools and the systems to equip them and empower them. So an example, right, is Starbucks. Starbucks is on every corner. They now have apps, they have cards. I mean, a customer can get a coffee anywhere. Now this is cities, right? Like obviously Dunkin' is very similar here, but they have done really well to make the aisles go in. You walk in, it's very like, you know where to go. It's just easy, right? And that keeps people coming back. Number 9 is leveraging personalization. Okay, so that's one thing that people want to feel like they're your priority. Let's say you have 100 customers and you talk to them every day. Great. Well, then let's say you got 1,000 customers. Are you calling them every day? No. So this is why you have the opportunity to use some personalization. And this can come in the form of targeting on different ads. You can, in your email campaigns, you can say insert first name, right? So you do a little dash, first name, last name. And then because your email already knows their first name, it'll automatically send that out and it'll be in their personalized brand, which is such a good automation tool. But ultimately, like you do want to make sure that you're focused on the person as a human, right? Like, so if they feel like they're just 1 in a million, that's really hard. REI does really well at this because they make you, even though their brand is huge, they make you feel like you're in the store and you're the only one they're selling to, with their messaging, with the way that they market online. It's just very personalized behind the brand. And one last tip here is that I always say is surprise and delight. And of course, thank your customers, but creating moments of magic for your customer that you go above and beyond, and it makes them want to come back, right? Or want to use you again. So an example of surprise and delight is we had this company in our studio called Zito, and they were like a home services business. And what they would do is they would write a handwritten card every time a service operator went to their house. And they would also, let's say the request came in and, because they were doing home repairs and home maintenance, they said, fix my garbage disposal, right? So what they would do is they would fix the garbage disposal, but then they would also maybe take out the trash to the street, because it's not a lot of hard work, but they go above and beyond, and they knew the trash needed to be out. So they just took it, right? And that's kind of something like, oh, what a nice little, it's a little moment of magic that their team could do to go above and beyond. And of course, saying thank you goes a long way. I'll just say it here. Thank your customers, because they're paying you the money, right? So if you're not saying thank you, what are you doing? So yes, I will. I'll pause here. I'll say, like, of course, like just to recap, and then we can do questions. But basically we talked, don't forget about the mom test, right? And then of course, like we don't forget about marketing strategy, but we've talked about 10 things that you can do to gain and 10 things you can do to retain. And I've spoken very quickly and there's a lot there. So I will pause for this last section if you have questions. And of course, any generic questions about anything at all for customers.